sometimes these movements have to be driven by people who are true believers. Because what happens is they push things all the way over and then it comes back. Americans are not an extreme people. We are not extreme. Americans are not socialist. Americans are not super right wing. Americans want a better life for their kids for the most part and are too busy with their everyday thing. I got to take my kid to baseball and I want to be able to afford after school activities for my kids. That's what they really care about. I want a little extra cash.
I'm Dave Rubin, and this is the Rubin Report. As always, guys, click that subscribe button and that little notification bell so you have a small chance, at least, of seeing our videos. And joining me today is a comedian, an actor, and co-host of the Fighter and the Kid podcast, Bryan Callen. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thank you, sir. Big fan, love it.
Big fan,
Here
both
I am.
ways.
I finally made it.
You're in the internet now. This is like the center of the
no
internet.
liability there at all. Yes, this right here.
Everything that we say here stays here. No one will get in any trouble. You're completely fine.
As long as you don't express yourself freely and thoughtfully, and with reason.
That seems like a good place to start.
Yeah.
Comedy in an age of cancellation. How you feeling these days?
I think that it feels as though this is the last bastion for satire, honest expression, original self-expression. You know, I've had comics call me and say, well, I've got this show with a certain network and I'm afraid that what I said, I expressed a point of view that was more complicated than some black or white, no pun intended.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, you're going for it already.
And should I do this? You have comics now wondering if they should edit themselves in podcasts. And my answer is, if that is what, if you are worried about that because you're working for that network, then you shouldn't work for that network. Then you're no longer a comic. Then you're no longer in the business of original self-expression. Thoughts and art has always been there to disturb, to shake things up. Let's take Will and Grace as an example. I auditioned for that show maybe 5 times. I can't remember if it was for Jack, if it was for Eric, it was for both. And I knew it was going to be a hit. But it was so groundbreaking. It was so astonishing. It was the first time that gay people were kind of highlighted as this, as people with senses of humor who wanted the same thing that straight people want. I remember that being a radical new idea. And it, back then, we always talk about how you can get canceled for certain words you say. Well, in the, let's say through all of American history, up through probably the 90s, if you were found out to be gay in the workplace, well, if you didn't get fired, you weren't going to get promoted. It was a major liability and physically dangerous. So along comes Will and Grace. And a network took a risk. So in that sense, you can point to examples where it's very important to continue to speak your mind. And it's very important when the pendulum swings too far right or too far left or too far in any direction. As an artist, you got to push back. You got to kind of go, you got to make fun of it. And that's through all this insanity, and there are a lot of bad ideas out there. And there are a lot of sort of like, we're very polarized. There's no room for nuance, as you know, as I'm sure you've picked up on. But I do think Americans have this really great safety valve, this switch, which is humor. We tend to make fun of ourselves. We tend to make fun of cancel culture already. We tend to make fun of all these things. Trump is always being made fun of, and so is the other side. So I think at least we are going to we'll always have that thing. Even kids now, my friend's son, who is 16, my buddy said, look at that butterfly. I wonder what he's gonna land on next. And his friend said, Dad, how are you assuming that's a he? I mean, how do you know? And already kids are making fun of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's very healthy.
But doesn't this seem a little unique in that there's like a runaway train aspect to it right now, where it used to be kind of like, one person randomly said one thing and they get taken out, where now it just feels like the whole track got destroyed, the train is going off, and everyone's kind of going with it at the same time.
If this was 1968, we'd be saying the same thing. and we'd be even more panicked. I think right now we're dealing with a confluence of events.
Yeah.
You're dealing with, the George Floyd, the terrible murder of George Floyd. You're dealing with COVID-19 where nobody has jobs and nobody has anywhere to go to. And you're dealing with all these uncertainties, and you're dealing with this incredibly polarizing figure named Donald Trump. So all of that stuff, I think, is a perfect storm. So it's when you're in it, it's hard to see a way out of it, and it's hard to see sense. I do think, again, there are a lot of bad ideas out there.
Yeah.
And I do think that, but again, if I'm a moderate person, I just am. I'm naturally moderate, medium.
Yeah. Well, when I was on your show, we were trying to figure out what we might differ on politically. We couldn't come up with that much.
No, I think you're a very reasonable. I've listened to you many times, and I've listened to your guests, and the truth is, you are a reasonable, fair-minded person.
Don't tell that to the New York Times.
Well, again, I think, and then I find myself saying, sometimes these movements have to be driven by people who are true believers. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is they push things all the way over, and then it comes back. Americans are not an extreme people. We are not extreme. Americans are not socialist. Americans are not super right-wing. Americans want a better life for their kids, for the most part, and are too busy with their everyday thing. I got to take my kid to baseball, and I want to be able to afford after-school activities for my kids. That's what they really care about. I want a little extra cash. I mean, if you really come down to it. And I think that the silent majority, the most they ever really do is write letters. But,
we tweet now. Come on.
Stuff like that. But come election time, a lot of times, if they feel like their bottom line is being affected, i.e., the way their children are being raised, educated, and whether or not they have a little extra cash in their pocket, that'll get them to the polls.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I got enough for this and I got enough for that.
Yeah, I want to stick with the comedy thing for a little bit because you mentioned how if you're a comic and you're working at a network that's making you censor or making you question yourself, then you're working at the wrong place.
Yes.
Isn't it odd, though, that for all of us that are now in the podcast, YouTube, whatever you want to call this thing, that now we're watching ourselves do it to ourselves. We're our own bosses. I'm not saying you're doing it and I'm not doing it, but we know a lot of people now that are getting in trouble because of what's being said on podcasts, and we know that Media Matters watches every word that somebody's going to say, so that if anybody says one thing the wrong way, they can take them out, even though these guys own their stuff.
Yeah, but trouble. When you say getting in trouble, the truth is that they're not. The truth is that I look at getting in trouble as not being able to earn a living. Corporations are incredibly, in many ways, spineless. And we'll get into that in a second and what I mean by that. But I think that you're still, look, I'm on stage all the time. I was in Arizona, I was in Texas. Anywhere I go, when I say things that seem reasonable, when I criticize the sort of, even whether it's conservatives or liberals, and I criticize both, people love it. People clap, people laugh, because typically, I always find that if I'm feeling this way, so is most of the country. Yeah. Because most people they're just reasonable. They're not indoctrinated into an ideology.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about comedy instead of the nonstop yelling you get everywhere else, check out our comedy playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're both right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.